Welcome, everyone, to Latter Daily Digest. We honor creators, and I've invited Jasmine to join me as a co-host in order to present some examples
Hello.
of people who participated in the Journal of Mormon Polygamy Conference. Thanks, Jasmine, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Jean, for having us. So, I invited Selene on to the Journal of Mormon Polygamy for her perspective as an LDS, active Latter day Saint woman in these spaces. And so, something that I really was struck by Selene is that she really thinks out her faith, especially when it comes to plural marriage and gender and how that works within the plan of salvation. So, Selene is also the producer of a recent film, The Angel, which is a folk horror film from the 1880s. It stars Doug Jones, who's actually like a really famous actor.
Yeah.
So the what I loved about the film is that it was through the eyes of plural wives rather than a male-centric view. So Selene really advocates for Latter-day Saints to tell their own stories through the lens of unapologetically claiming their identity. The quote that she gave me, which I think is really cool, is, quote, "In order to do so, we must navigate our own histories on their own terms and be unafraid of the peculiar, whether it makes us uncomfortable or not." So, yeah, this is Selene. We're so happy to have her on.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you guys. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we'll start a little bit about your growing up years and the formation of your faith, and how was that like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in Utah, just like Wasatch Front sort of deal, very, very basic.
Yeah.
I was raised a member of the church by like multi-generational members of the church parents. I always had a very good experience with the church growing up. I really, I found a lot of comfort in the gospel. When I was having stressful times in high school, it was something that was very healing and grounding for me. When I ended up going to college, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was very into theater and stories and things like that. So I actually initially was going down the theater pathway.
Oh, and
And
Selene,
yeah,
there was a couple of questions I had. So
yeah,
were you pioneer stock on
yes.
one side or the other?
I
So
have pioneer stock on both sides,
on both
although I
sides?
do have on my maternal grandmother line, there's some coming from Italy, which is like my
Okay.
and some like converts, but everyone else is pioneer stock.
So we'll have to do family search when we're in the same building and see if we're related then.
Yes, absolutely. Let's do it.
And then second of all, as a youth, did you have leadership positions at all as a beehive, mime aid?
You know, it's so
Moral?
funny. I had a very, very small, intimate youth group. Like there was really, in terms of my age of girls, there was 3 of us. And so we did but we just kind of all rotated through those callings. And it was just, and we usually only had like a couple girls older or a couple girls younger. And so it was always a very small group, which for me, I really loved. I felt really, really close with the youth in my ward. We had a very small group of boys as well. We felt really, really connected with each other. It was very low drama. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So, but yeah, so like in terms of leadership, it's like, yeah, but like not in a way that like counts necessarily.
It's almost like thrust into the leadership role instead of proving yourself as the
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, well, it's just us, so we're just going to rotate through that.
Like going
Which
through the
was like,
motions.
yeah, but it was very like there was a lot of like camaraderie and a lot of closeness. And honestly, I really overall I loved. I know sometimes junior high and high school can be really traumatic for people. I like developed some really, really close knit groups of friends, and it made me really value those types of group dynamics, and feeling like I really valued everyone, and everyone had something very specific to contribute to the dynamic. And was like really irreplaceable. And that really formed my understanding of like friendship and group dynamics, which I think does translate to some of my beliefs about polygamy. But
And so
anyway.
just to let you know, when I was teachers quorum president in our ward here in San Lorenzo, California, there were 24 names on the roll for just the teachers quorum, and half were active and half were inactive. But that means it only took a couple of teachers to prepare the sacrament, right? Get it ready. So I could give assignments, and you only had like one assignment a month to do those things. And we tried to do, bike rides as a quorum and stuff like that, And so there was some things that we were able to do. Now as a youth, we got to go to BYU a couple times where we rented 4 buses. We drove to Utah overnight. We spent a week at BYU and did that. Did you guys have any activities that you did as youth?
We had good activity. We had girls camp and stuff. We didn't, I don't know if we did anything ever really that, like, we were never renting buses and stuff. That's cool.
Right.
But like,
where's girls camp go to?
There's a property that we always did we always had a stake girls camp. We never did like a ward only girls camp, which I loved, because then you kind of build your little camps. And it was always funny to us because some of the other wards, because they had more girls, there would be drama, and we'd be like, oh, we can't relate to that drama because there's like 4 of us. So there's like, what drama are you going to have with 4 of you? But like, it was kind of fun to go to the same camp spot every year, because it was like, this is the place that, it built, so there's so many memories and so much nostalgia built into that, which I miss. Honestly, now I'm like, it's June, I'm like, oh, I miss girls camp. I loved girls camp.
There you go. And did you have favorite subjects in high school?
I really loved, honestly, there's a lot of subjects I liked. I really enjoyed English. I really enjoyed, I had some history was something I adored. And I also took some comparative politics class that I really enjoyed as well. And I also loved the arts. Like, I was involved in music and theater. And that was the thing. Like, I was very, academically minded, but I didn't really want to go into any of those types of careers. I was very much like, how can that serve the arts? Because that was where my heart lied, even though I had a lot of aptitudes in those more academic settings.
That's awesome. Yeah. So everything that you learned, you were thinking, how do I apply it to the arts?
Yeah, pretty much.
That shows. So the film that you do on The Angel, it is about 2 plural wives. And I see how you're dealing with these issues of politics, these issues of like worthiness, the gender dynamics. And I see that what you're doing is you're casting what life would be like for a plural wife. Yeah, so what I see is I see a very kind of an ethnographic view of how life as a plural wife would be. And so what usually, like, the conversation we have in the church is plural marriage from a man's perspective. And something that I think was done really well in the film is plural marriage from 2 women's perspectives. And it switches from woman to woman, and it shows like the whole panorama of what living a plural marriage would be like for different women, and how religiosity plays into that, how beliefs play into that, how following the Lord versus following like Satan's path and things like that are very core to what it is to be Mormon. I see that like throughout. I mean, it's such a high quality film.
Thank you so much. And I think that we really focusing on like the women's perspective, for me, something that's very frustrating in terms of what I see in media and therefore in some parts of public discourse, is we see kind of a stripping of women of their religious identity, where it's like, instead of having a religious identity, you're just a victim of your religious circumstance. I think that we see that in Under the Banner of Heaven. I think that we see that in Heretic, although I think Heretic is still an excellent film. I have a lot of issues with Under the Banner of Heaven, and we also see this in terms of like how we engage with social media. Like I'm reminding of like Ballerina Farm, and people are like, she's a victim of her circumstances. And it's just like, okay, you know, and that's really been in media from the beginning. I mean, you look at something like Trapped by the Mormons, like early like 1920s silent films, sort of anti-Mormon propaganda films. These women being seduced by these vampiric Mormon men who are taking them to be their wives, and it becomes this very just like, we're kidnapping you, and there's no sorts of, you know, religious internal life that exists. I mean, I think you even see this. I mean, that's something that kind of annoys me about the premise of like Paint Your Wagon, is he's like, take her, whatever. And it's like, and now she's not Mormon anymore. Like, she has no religious identity. And I think that is like a major problem. I think that women have incredibly rich religious lives. And I think that was really important to navigate, not only how they're navigating plural marriage, but how they're navigating the theology that they believe in, and kind of like how are they going to engage in that. And that's something I'm really excited for in the feature version called The Third Wife. We have this whole scene where these women are discussing the scriptures and like kind of interpreting like, well, what about this scripture? What about this scripture? And it's this very tense, incredible scene, but they're very able to articulate what they think about their own religious beliefs. And I think that is important to see, because I think that that's my lived reality, and that's what I'd like to see.
Yes, yeah, and I love that, especially when you talk about like women who are suffragettes in the early Utah period. There are stories that really cannot be overlooked, that certain political decisions were made based on their very fruitful religious internal lives. And so I love that. So when did you first encounter polygamy? And what did you think about it? And do you mind telling us kind of like a development of your understanding as you've grown?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was younger, I didn't think too much about polygamy. I remember one time, this is kind of like I don't know, just like a random experience, but like, I don't know, I'm probably like 11 or 12, and I'm thinking about polygamy as an idea. And I'm like, I don't know what I think about that. Like, how should I feel about that? And I felt this degree of concern. And I remember actually praying about it. And not everyone has the same experience, but I prayed about it. And kind of the prompting that I got for me was just like, that's none of your business. Are you in a polygamous marriage? Like, that's their family. You don't need to worry about it. I will worry about them, and you don't need to worry about it. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess like people can like, it really, for me, I was my takeaway of like, I feel like maybe God is more aware of the individual than I think that we think sometimes. And I felt kind of a peace, and I didn't think about it. And it wasn't really until, later into adulthood, where we were engaging with this film, both the feature and the short version, I was having actually a lot of concerns and thoughts about gender ideology and the church, and being like, what do I think about all that? And it was actually in engaging in plural marriage as a theological concept that resolved those other concerns that I had. And in like a deep and profound way, which is not usually what happens, but that's what happened for me. And
was that during your college years?
Yeah, that was just post-college, but yes. So yeah.
Oh yeah. So you was BYU always on your radar? Did your parents go to BYU or anything?
No.
Or how did that happen?
I'm the only one in my family who went to BYU. We're from like Salt Lake County, and there's a little bit of like,
there's those Utes going on. Yeah.
Well, like, it's so funny because we weren't even that. Both my parents went to Snow College, and then both of my siblings went to Utah State University. And so we were just completely separate from the U versus BYU thing. But I will say something that is very silly about Mormonism is, you'll see like Latter-day Saints being like I'm a member, but I'm not like a Utah member. And it's like, I'm a Utah member, but I'm not a Utah County member. And like, there is this kind of like distancing of trying to be like, we're this different, trying to get away from something, which I think is like I mean, I think that's shame based. I think that's generational trauma based. But that was like probably part of it where I was like, I can't be from Utah and go to BYU. That's like, it was like embarrassing to me, which is now I think is so silly. But when I engaged, BYU was the right place for me to go. And I honestly, the media arts program, the film program there, I loved it. I loved all of my professors. I loved all of my classmates, many of whom I still work with and have connections with. And I have the career I have today because I went to BYU, which I'm extremely grateful for. And I feel kind of bad that I was so extremely biased against it.
Yeah, it's kind of that's definitely a thing where in Utah they're kind of like there's this stereotype of this Mormon who goes to BYU and is very staunch and inflexible, you know. And it's really interesting because what I see from you is that you're the opposite. You're very flexible with certain things. You really think things out. So that's really interesting. And speaking about, you know, your reconciliation with the gender issues and the gender ideologies in Mormonism, what is feminism to you, and how do you, with that understanding, how do you navigate your plural marriage and women's roles in the church, and how does that work out?
Yeah, so for me, something that was so beautiful about my exploration about polygamy was really digging into it and seeing like the women's suffrage connection. And I was like, whoa, that is really, really interesting. And as I kept digging, I found all sorts of like really incredible feminist rhetoric from both women and men at that time frame. And there's this quote from George Q. Cannon that just like really was impressive to me, where it was like, I believe it's like, as the generations go on, nobler types of womanhood will be developed until like in the millennium, she'll stand in her queenly glory side by side as like equal with man. And there was this belief that I knew growing up, I always had heard this thing where it's like when Joseph Smith turns the keys of the dispensation of the fullness of times, and we have the priesthood restored, we have an outpouring of truth, and we see this kind of like worldwide. And I remember being like, look at how many more inventions there were 1830 onward. And it's like, that's because there's more truth in the world, which I think is like a really beautiful, cool thing that we get to say everything that's good was because of the church was restored. And I'm like, that's so lovely. Something that they said at the time also was they're saying the advancement of women's rights are also a direct result of that key being turned. Like when they knew no Latter-day Saints were involved in the Seneca Falls Convention, but they were like, yeah, that was because the priesthood was restored on the earth and they were impressed upon by the Holy Ghost. And like, that's really incredible. And so for me, feminism is, I think it's a heritage of being a Latter-day Saint, where it's like, hey, it's this kind of this belief of this like removal of curses. I think that is really beautiful about how that can be. It's a restoration to the true order of things. Now, with that, I do believe that it needs to be just. I think that certain forms of like contemporary feminism, I disagree with, because I do not think they give us the end result that we want. Because I think that looking at it where you have, okay, at the base level, we have an asymmetry with men and women, where women give birth and men don't give birth. And so just the basics of the reproductive relationship, which is how gender is defined, how sex is defined, we are already asymmetrical. And so in order for it to be just and equal, we have to have an asymmetrical application to create a just and equal society.
So is that this asymmetrical model, is that how you get to polygamy, where there's one man and multiple women? Or is it more of like Joseph Smith, you know, having wives who were married to other men? Or how does that shake out with poly relationships or polygamist relationships?
Yeah. So for me, looking at it, it seems to me that polygyny, which is one man with multiple women, is what is optimally beneficial to women, actually. Polyandry, I don't think gives, I think that in cases where we see polyandry, it's usually a serial polyandry where like her husband will die or she'll get divorced and women will be with multiple men. And that seems to work well. I also
like Lori Daybell.
Sure. Well, isn't she still married to Moroni or something? Isn't that like she's married to him, but he's in.
But she's had prior husbands as well.
She's had prior, yeah. Well, I think that I would prefer
That's
to look at. I would prefer to
thing.
look at like an Emmeline B. Wells who had 3 husbands progressively, and examples like that. I mean, I think that
Eliza R. Snow.
Eliza R. Snow Smith, as she preferred to be called by the end of her life. So like there's that, but I don't think that women, the biology does not suggest that women genuinely want multiple male sexual relationships at a time. And this also makes sense with, so take infidelity. We already know from studies, this is like a silly small example. We know from studies that men are most concerned when their wife is unfaithful. They are most concerned about an image of her having sex with the man. A woman is most concerned about him saying that he loves this other woman. Why is that significant? It's significant because what men fear and what women fear in their reproductive relationships are different. Men fear paternal uncertainty. Is that child that I'm investing in my child or not? I don't know. Women never have to have any uncertainty. It's in them. It's their child, right? Now, women are afraid of abandonment. If you're going to get pregnant and become the most physically vulnerable you are ever going to become in your entire life, you need your husband to not abandon you. And so the fear of him saying that he loves another woman is the fear, are you going to abandon me for her? So that fear of him committing to multiple women can be solved that can be addressed. The idea of a woman being pregnant, the paternal uncertainty cannot be resolved in polyandry. It's just something it's like that. And that's a core male fear that women can't relate to. And so I also think that women have a tendency towards socializing with women, other women, and benefit from relationships with other women in a way that men don't with other men. Anyway, I could keep going. I better stop now, or this will become
that could be another show, because we want to get to how you got involved with, and this is part of it because Jasmine was aware of your philosophies and other things. And so Jasmine, I guess you asked her to be on a panel for the Journal of Mormon Polygamy conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea with the panel was that it was targeted towards diverse opinions. And so we hear a lot of opinions that are anti-polygamist. We hear a lot of opinions that are pro-polygamist, especially from the fundamentalist corners. And we hear a lot of, we hear a lot of opinions such as Carolyn Pearson of LDS women who do not like polygamy, so the
ghost
niche,
of polygamy,
the ghost of eternal polygamy, that's what she wrote. But we do not hear a lot of opinions regarding faithful LDS, temple recommend holding women who understand polygamy in a way that benefits them and in a way that they see as a very spiritual core tenet to the restoration and to their lives. And so that's where I thought Selene was so interesting, is because I have found that, with the massive amount of women, I live in Utah County, and with the massive amount of LDS women here, a lot of women shy away from the topic of polygamy. LDS women, they don't want to talk about it. And if they do talk about it, they're against it. I very rarely find someone who is an LDS card-carrying, faithful Latter-day Saint who actually sees polygamy as a net positive. Do you think that is... that describes you, Selene, that you see it as a net positive in some circumstances?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because for me, I believe that the revelation for polygamy came from God, and I believe that God knows what makes us happiest better than we do. And I have a lot of faith in that, and that gave me a lot of bandwidth to play with when I was exploring this topic.
Maybe
Yeah,
Jasmine, you could tell us a little bit about the panelists and just do like a 30 seconds on each one,
sure.
and how you thought Selene fit in with that group.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had Whitney Horning on, and Whitney Horning is she has some really strong and very well thought out ideologies regarding monogamy and why that's important. And she draws from the Bible. She wrote a book called yeah, it's called Wisdom, and it's about how the masculine and feminine balance, and how, you know, when you have one man and one woman, you have that beautiful masculine feminine balance. And she uses scripture specifically from the Bible to make her argument. It's a good book. It has good sources as well. And then we also had Margaret Toscano, who is, she's an academic. She's in academia. She is working at the University of Utah, and she's been studying Joseph Smith and plural marriage for a very long time. She's also one of the September 6, or I guess a September 7 is what she would be. We had Charlotte Erickson, who Selene and I are friends with. And Charlotte is a plural wife. She's a first wife. And she was there to represent women who actually live polygamy for religious reasons. And she talks about how she had some inspiration and some spiritual guidance towards making a space for her sister wife, and making a physical space, like in her home and in her like a room and a different kitchen and things like that, and also emotional space in her marriage. And so Selene fit in really well because she was, she is an LDS, you know, card carrying member of the church who is pro polygamy and does see it as part of the plan of the restoration. So yeah, I was so happy to have her on the panel. It was a heated panel, especially when we started talking about men's role in polygamous societies and how there will be an excess of men. It got pretty heated. And this is the idea of, if we do believe in polygamy, or if Mormons do believe in polygamy, there's going to be an excess of men. What do we do with those men? And that is
An excess of unmarried men.
Unmarried, celibate, or incel, involuntarily celibate men. And right. What is their worth to God? You know, do they not deserve a marriage? You know, and so pro polygamy advocates have to wrestle with that question of, are these men just worthless, or is this evolution? Is this women selecting the best men, and the rest of the men not carrying on their seed? Is that evolution? And that is a social theory called hypergamy. And it happens, it's a social theory all around the world. It's not Mormon signature. And so Jordan Peterson talks about hypergamy. A lot of academics talk about this idea where women would rather share a man that's a high value man than have children with a man who perhaps is not as emotionally intelligent or financially well off to take care of the kids or whatnot. And so pro polygamy advocates, they do have to wrestle with that question. It becomes difficult because in the case of Colorado City, the Lost Boys, we had a ton of boys that ended up in the Salt Lake homeless shelter and the Las Vegas homeless shelter because they were being kicked out. And so we began talking about that on the panel, and it got pretty heated. So yeah, I think it was the most heated part of the conference.
I want to add one also thing with the Lost Boys in the Colorado City. I want to also specify that the reason those boys were kicked out was men. Men were making the decision about where the women were going. Women weren't making that decision. Yeah. And so I think that in terms of, yes, we have to deal with those sorts of inequalities, but also it's like, well, do we think that women are obligated to give men sex, you know? But I do think that in the terms of like those large populations of men,
to give like low value men sex, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying any man sex, any man she doesn't want to have sex with, you know? Like no one's owed reproduction. And so I think that what is horrible about the Lost Boys with Colorado City is that was decided by men. That wasn't decided by women. I don't think that women naturally choose to be one of 50 wives. I think that that doesn't make sense. They might choose to be one of 2 or 3 or 4. But in terms of those mass numbers, I don't think that if we let the market decide, which is women making the decision, I think that we see it more equitable than we would otherwise imagine. But anyway, that's another podcast.
And so Selene, what did you think about the Journal of Mormon Polygamy Conference?
I mean, it was definitely, I think it was an exciting environment to be in, just because it was so, like, I feel going into it, I knew there was a lot of controversy because there's so much controversy. I mean, just around polygamy is already an extremely loaded topic. And then you stack in the kind of the approach of like the polygamy denial, and you have so many people who are attending who lean that way. It makes it into a very like interesting, like environment, which I think that I would rather everyone come together and have these conversations, because otherwise it's like, I don't get why you wouldn't want to engage, because whoever's speaking the loudest is going to be who gets to control the narrative. So we all need to come together. And I really, really admire the way Jasmine put together the panel. I felt like what was really cool, and I had heard comments from some of my friends that it was an extremely interesting, like diverse, because sometimes you see panels and it's like a bunch of people who all agree with each other. But it was like very specific viewpoints all in conversation. And that was like a cool and exciting experience. Like I enjoyed having that conversation in that context. I think it was a cool thing. And I would hope that like we continuing to get a diversity of opinion in something like that, I think could be an exciting thing. Like something that I really appreciate, while I disagree with the conclusions of like polygamy denier, most of the conclusions of polygamy deniers, I appreciate the insistence on bringing this topic like into discussion, where it's like we have to talk about it, and also in asking the certain questions that they have and digging into sources. Like I think that we're re-examining things that we've taken for granted, and I think that that's helpful, and I'm grateful for that. I think that's good.
That's right. I noticed like a tension in the air, right? No matter what was happening, but I also noticed that people were genuinely interested in all people's opinions. There seemed to be an overall sort of like love and respect for everybody there. And I didn't see anybody like have disdain for somebody, and like totally like throw them out. There was a good amount of people who were, genuinely interested in hearing what people have to say so that they can develop their sensibilities about these things.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people were willing to change their opinions, but they were at least willing to consider changing, right?
Well, it was interesting because people who believe that Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, or who think Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, were able to see how people who get to the conclusion that he didn't practice polygamy research, and vice versa. And so it was like, it kind of came down to like, throw down the sources, let's analyze the sources. It was pretty fun.
Yeah. And so one thing I wanted to just get on this show real quickly is, Selene, talk about the projects you've been in over the last 5 years. And like, when did you graduate from BYU roughly?
Yeah, I finished in 2018. And so I've been working full-time in film since then. And we've been developing the feature version of The Angel, called The Third Wife, since 2021. That's when one of our directors first pitched the movie to me, and we're hoping to go into production very soon on that. We made this proof of concept short. We shot it back in 2024, so last year. And it's been just so well received. It's been very exciting to see. My favorite feedback is people will see it and then I'll run into them or talk to them like a week or 2 weeks later, and they'll be like, I've been thinking about the angel, and they want to like talk about it and think about it. I think that as a horror film, it's definitely one that haunts you and sticks with you and forces you to kind of confront and engage with things that might make you uncomfortable. And I think that that is an exciting and powerful thing that art can do. And I think that's good for you. I think that's good for people to engage with things that make them uncomfortable.
And I saw there was a project called Cairo.
Oh, Cryo. Yes.
Cairo.
No, yeah. That was a film
Cryo.
made back. It was shot. I was involved on the back end of some of the, in terms of preparing deliverables for the sale. But it was shot back in 2018 while the writer director Barrett Bergen, while he was still a student. It was before he made his capstone. So like for like no money. And then it was in post-production for a million years because there was no money. And he was able to sell it to Saban in 2022, and it got distribution, which is like a really exciting feat for a film in the position that it was in, which was cool. So yeah, it's a fun, interesting, plan of salvation, inversion, exploration. So it's worth it. It's worth a watch.
That's fun. That's awesome.
We want to bring you back and talk more about the projects that you're in and how this group, it's like a group of people that are being creative.
So I'm part of a film society called the Glass Lookers, and we advocate for a new wave of Latter-day Saint film. There's been 5 waves of Latter-day Saint film. You're probably most familiar with the 5th wave. This was really kicked off by Richard Dutcher with Brigham City, God's Army, which are excellent films, but then it kind of cannibalized itself with lower and lower quality
Mormons at our barbecue.
So much, yeah. So respect for the hustle. It's very difficult to make a film. And they're also making a film where it's like, let's make a film for a Latter-day Saint audience. And that gets really weird and insular and iterative in like a really weird way really quickly. So like I have respect for those filmmakers, but that's not what we're going for. And because that has become so much like that's what a Mormon film is, we want to have a radical departure from that. And this is something that we actually have a manifesto that the director I work with, Barrett Bergen, wrote, where it was like, here are these 5 principles that we're following in order to create incredible identity-based cinema for a broad audience. And that's why The Angel is so near and dear to my heart, because it really is built for a general audience. We've had so many different reactions. And when we did our test screenings, we tested it primarily with non-members, and it was received really well. Honestly, we were kind of like, members might not like this film at all. But we're really lucky that they do. Most of them do like it, which we're like, oh, great. That's a little bonus. We were kind of expecting people not to like it because it's horror, and we have, as a people, an aversion to horror. But I was really pleasantly surprised that people have wanted to engage with the film, and that's been exciting, because we were anticipating that not being the case, and that makes me really excited for the feature if that's something that we can see. But again, our priority is a general audience.
Right.
Fun. Can I ask you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to ask you. Can I ask you this one question about what strategies can women use, since you've navigated these polygamy waters very well? What strategies can women use to navigate polygamist issues and gender issues?
I think that the biggest thing is it's very difficult, because I recognize that it can be very intensely emotional, but being able to like separate the emotion out a little bit, where you can have faith that's like, well, kind of like, to be honest, it's kind of like reality is going to be what reality is, and reality doesn't care about your feelings, like, which can be very brutal, right? And so being willing to confront, like, is what I don't want to be true, and being able to be strong enough to look that and be like, I have to ask whether or not the thing I don't want to be true is true. And I think that having faith that, like, I mean, for me, I had a lot of, especially in my college years, a lot of like mental health struggles with like, there's just so much pressure with like life and stuff. And I had a lot of really intense depressive moments. And something that I had to do is I had to have faith that the plan of salvation was a plan of happiness. I was like, I have to trust that like even being alive is something that is worth it. That like God truly knows is best for me. And that was something that as I tested that and as I had faith in it, I was able to find out that that was true, which I'm really grateful for, and is like very intensely, emotionally personal for me. And I would just encourage other women to trust that, things that seem like they're going to be scary don't need to be scary. There's so much that you can innovate. There's so many ways you can think about things. I think like if you're like, go to therapy, also.
Yeah. Yeah.
Resolve your own like kind of emotional challenges and your self-esteem challenges and things like that. Like it's difficult. It's difficult to be a human. And it's difficult to be a woman, I think, like in this world. Are you kidding me? Like take care of yourself and let what reality is going to be exist separately, and then figure it out from there.
I love that. I love that. I also have had very depressive moments, especially in the conversation of polygamy. I mean, when I went through those original Joseph Smith sources, man, I was depressed. And so I love how the separating the emotions from separating the reality of what happened and kind of figuring it out from there instead of just making it the same. My greatest mental health struggles were going through polygamous documents. And it was difficult to see that the church that I had grown up in and the church that I loved, some of the prophets had done some very terrible things to some women, and those accounts are there and they're very difficult to read. And then I was able to also see, the suffragettes, and that there's a double-edged sword to polygamy. It's not a clear-cut answer. And so to be open to possibility, to be open to creativity, to be open to kind of a more expansive view, instead of getting like smaller and smaller, it gets more expansive. So I really admire that about you, Selene.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So
I appreciate that.
Thanks, Selene, for coming on. I actually, we're going to have this show be about, the Journal of Mormon Polygamy Conference. And there's so much more I do want to talk to you about. And we'll say like and subscribe to our audience. And I know that the founders of the Journal of Mormon Polygamy are working on the next conference, and so it'll happen again. And I think
Awesome.
That's only good for history, for all the things that are going on. And so
yes, let's pull out the sources. Let's look at them.
That's right. Thanks, Selene, for coming on again, and everybody have a great rest of 2025, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good one. Thank you.